This is a film study focused on how Jahmyr Gibbs really led the way for the Detroit Lions in their Week 12 comeback win over the Giants. Of course, he scored 3 touchdowns total, 15 carries on the ground for 219 rushing yards. He's now up to 6.1 yards per carry for the 2025 season. Unfortunately, I do not have film of his third touchdown, the game winner in overtime, 69 yards. I just have very limited film available to me today. I wish that I had better access, but I do not, so that's disappointing to me that I won't be able to feature and talk about that game-winning run in this video. I think I do have 4 or 5 plays queued up to kind of illustrate the impact that he had. Now pushes him up over 950 rushing yards for the season, 10 rushing touchdowns at this point. I do want to briefly talk about when his touchdowns occurred. The first one, down 17-7, the pass catch of 3 yards, out in the right flats. You're down by 10, and so he's kind of showing up clutch in this situation, if you ask me, because the last thing you wanted was to fall to 6-5 with a game against the Packers 4 days later on Thanksgiving. Then the fourth quarter touchdown that cut a 27-17 deficit down to 3. Finally, the overtime game winner, 69 yards. Let's get to the film, and I'll try to break down as many of the plays as possible, number 1. And number 2, at the end, I'll give you some of my summary judgments and my evaluations of perhaps some other players on the offense at the end. First possession here, we've got a toss crack concept from 11 personnel. A lot of NFL fans get triggered because they've been conditioned to think that plays like a crack concept are illegal. You would do yourself a favor by watching other levels of football to see that they are not. Now, you do have to block it in a particular way in the NFL so they don't throw a flag. And in this case, St. Brown does a great job, if you ask me, on the pin down / crack on Brian Burns. It is an 11 personnel group, even though it doesn't necessarily look like it. Of course, there's an I formation backfield. The lone tight end on the field is Brock Wright. He's actually lined up at fullback. He'll lead the way for Jahmyr Gibbs. Normally, the fullback, in this case tight end, is assigned to kicking out the force player. And you see that's what happens here. And what it does is it allows the running back to put his foot in the ground and burst downhill, which plays perfectly to the talents and the skills and the ability of Jahmyr Gibbs, number 1. Number 2, he was running with some tenacity yesterday, breaking tackles multiple times on some of his touchdown runs. In fact, in this case, he's downhill on a toss concept, so untouched from his depth back in the backfield, he's going to be able to lay a shot on NFL safeties and cornerbacks if he can't juke them. Same play from the end zone angle. Again, it's a 2nd and 8 with the ball on the left hash. Kind of difficult to see Brock Wright, but he's on the midline along with Jahmyr Gibbs, Jared Goff, and the center, Glasgow. Toss crack concept, like I said, St. Brown is off screen to our right, and you get a really nice view here of how he's executing this. Basically, think like you're trying to front someone up and set a screen in basketball. The only difference is you can't move while doing so. Here, St. Brown is doing it with the necessary amount of force. Let's put it that way. The NFL and in fact, a lot of fans do not want to see a ton of physicality for whatever reason. In this case, St. Brown was able to execute the block, and then Brock Wright gets out in front, goes to get the force player, number 22. I think that's Phillips. And then Gibbs tries to lay a shot on one safety, and that takes out 2. Unfortunately, they're able to grab his foot briefly and pull him down and prevent anything further than an 11-yard gain. Moving forward here, Detroit's down 17-7. I think we're into the 3rd possession in the 2nd quarter. And this is what I call a running back cheat play. Some people just call it fast to the flats. It means the running back, in this case Gibbs, and the quarterback are both flowing in the same direction. Quarterback Jared Goff is reverse pivoting, reaching the football out. Of course, he's not actually trying to hand the football off to Jahmyr Gibbs. He's just trying to show the football to the defense at the 1st and the 2nd level, number 1. Number 2, I believe St. Brown is tasked with taking his defensive back corner in such a path so that either St. Brown or the corner himself will cut off that safety and prevent that safety from getting involved. Just a sheer numbers game, really, at this point, if you ask me. Focusing on Jahmyr Gibbs, it's a great catch over his right shoulder and then turning the football out over his left shoulder. So you're talking about a quick transition of his visual focus on the football while he's transferring the ball from his right hand to his left, and he's got to keep his foot in bounds. You get a great demonstration, if you ask me, of his coordination, number 1, his hand-eye coordination, number 1, and his ability to gear down quickly, and keep his feet in bounds while outstretching the ball past the pylon. That's actually a misnomer. That ball that should indicate that the score was 17-14 after he stretched the ball across the end zone. Same play from the end zone angle. And first of all, you get Skipper kind of pinning down on the defensive tackle to really eliminate him from being available to impact the play, number one. Number two, St. Brown's going to try to get to the outside shoulder of Holland. I don't think that it's really, that he actually accomplishes that task here. You can see Holland flows over the top, trying to match Gibbs' route. But even what St. Brown did forced Holland to stay at a certain depth such that he couldn't cut the angle. I don't think he's going to catch Jahmyr Gibbs anyway. It's a great job of Gibbs outstretching his hands to get to touchdown. Why does this work? Because the key that Brian Burns is looking at, in this case Skipper, the eligible tight end, is stepping down. Brian Burns can't just violently go upfield unless he's reading the running back. If he's reading the running back, that's different. There are some defensive structures where you will do so. He's reading his key, which is, in this case, Skipper. And since Skipper steps down, Burns is stepping down. He's closing off the gap that he's responsible for outside of the tight end / offensive lineman Skipper. As a result, the path that Gibbs is taking is perfectly designed to exploit that. Basically means no one can defend him unless one of these inside linebackers is going to take off and go in man, and it doesn't look like to me that Detroit suspects that, because if they did, then St. Brown would probably try to pin that inside linebacker as opposed to making Holland bow his path out over the top, essentially making it an indefensible play. Smooth, soft catch, transition to reaching the football out. Just an amazing moment there, of course, down by 10, something that Gibbs would recreate a little bit later in the game. What I mean when I say recreate is take a 10-point deficit and cut it to 3. In this case, it happened in the fourth quarter. It's a 2nd and 5. There's a lot happening here that I think is really exceptional to talk about. The left guard and the right guard both do a nice job, don't get me wrong, but the right guard is a starter, a second-round pick who we would expect that out of. Left guard is a backup, of course, who's replacing Christian Mahogany, and in my opinion, he's done a fantastic job on this particular play. Gets Gibbs through, to the second, even the third level of the defense. I'll show this a couple of times from the All-22, and then you guys can check it out from the end zone as well. So we're talking about how 74 is able to stab or reach out his inside hand, his left hand, to the defensive tackle, and then move up to this inside linebacker right here. Now, the linebacker flows with Gibbs, so 74 has to adjust what he's doing, and he takes him basically where he wants him to go, or where he wants to go. So both Radledge and 74 have closed off the inside linebacker such that Gibbs can cut off their block and the center's block as well. Sprung into the 2nd/3rd level of the defense. I don't know about you, but when I was watching this, I thought to myself, There was a period of time where I knew he was gone. It was not here yet, but I think Jahmyr Gibbs already knew, because watch his helmet right here immediately snap off of the defender, Holland, because he knew, okay, I'm gone. There's nothing that this guy can do to get me. I think it was probably once he put his foot in the ground here, I was like, okay, I think he's gone. I think Jahmyr Gibbs knew it a little bit sooner. A very physical play, and run and finish. The only complaint I would say is, get in the end zone. Bad things happen when you take your time needlessly, and in my opinion, Jahmyr Gibbs is too spectacular of a football player and too talented, and he's showing it every week on film for us to watch him waltz into the end zone like that. Still a cool moment, don't get me wrong. He doesn't need cool points or style points. They happen organically during the play, in my opinion. Same play from the end zone angle, and like I said, Radledge and 74, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce for a moment, those guys do a great job. The difference here is that Radledge is not trying to combo. So Radledge gets up a little quicker to the inside linebacker level. You can also see that both of the Giants' inside linebackers are getting their hands to the face. Although 54 here kind of lands a shot on 74's neck, but then full extension. So both of those guys are in the same position, 54 and 58. They're both in the same position. Clearly, they're being taught to do that. But in any case, because Radledge is not comboing, and 74 is, so 74 is punching and then releasing that defensive tackle to the left tackle, in this case, Taylor Decker, that makes him a little bit slower. Radledge is already engaged. He's already got two hands on his face. 74 hasn't got there yet. And it works out in Detroit's favor because Gibbs cuts off of Glasgow's block and off of 74's block. I think he played better in the run game at times than maybe we even knew watching it live speed. This one, should be one that makes it kind of easy to evaluate. And then running through contact, stiff-arming Holland finally allows Gibbs to put the Jets on and get into fifth gear. It really wouldn't have mattered at this point, to be honest with you. He was going to outrun the guy anyway. Again, I don't have the overtime run that puts the game away in Detroit's favor, unfortunately. It's one that I would like to have film of, but nonetheless, I don't have access to at this time. I will say this. For him to be an MVP consideration, I think he should be. I recognize that a lot of NFL fans look at the game in a disproportionate manner because they receive evaluation and discussion from people that focuses on the quarterbacks 70 to 80% of the time. And I think that people would do themselves a favor by watching other levels of football and getting more familiar with actual football and not just the NFL. Jahmyr Gibbs should be a part of the MVP conversation. He's the best player on the field yesterday against the Giants. He's been the best player on the field multiple times this season. In fact, he's upwards of 950 rushing yards on only 155 carries. I think 10 rushing touchdowns, 6.1 yards per carry, 6.13 to be precise. And I will say this, he's alternated having explosive games on the ground with being shut down the last 5 weeks. In the run game, that is. The Eagles held him down 2 weeks prior to that. The Vikings did. So that sets up for a Thanksgiving Day showdown with the Packers, who, of course, held him down significantly in Week 1. I think that kind of actually makes his numbers for the season look even better, that Green Bay was able to hold him down and limit him to such a low number of yards per carry and just yards per touch in general. He did have 10 catches against Green Bay in Week 1 on 10 targets, but I think only generated 19 yards or maybe 21 yards on those carries. So a really interesting season that's unfolded for Jahmyr Gibbs. It's not been the smooth road that anyone would have liked for the Detroit Lions so far, but because of Gibbs's heroics in Week 12, to now stand at 7-4 and an opportunity to get even, or actually get ahead of, I should say, the Green Bay Packers by winning on Thanksgiving Day. If you guys appreciated the video or enjoyed it at all, please let me know in the comments section. Number one, like I said, I apologize for not having access to not having film of the game-winning touchdown run. As soon as I get access to that, I'll obviously post a video up or put something on Twitter or in the Lions Discord. In any case, if you think other Lions fans would enjoy this film study look at Jahmyr Gibbs' play from Week 12, albeit a drastically shorter one than I usually produce, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.